Well, let's get started. My name's Ariana, and I know some of you, but thanks to everyone for being here. Suzanne and I met in a networking workshop with Lindsay Bryan Podvin, who runs Mind Money Balance and is a really great person to know in our field. And these workshops, I do sometimes once a month, sometimes less. They are mostly to help all of you in a way that improves your liberation focus in your practice and also your business development. So we get a lot of people here that are already in private practice or about to start private practice. And we try to hit on both of those pieces, liberation, business, within the mental health field. Those are the main things to know about me. Yeah. I think that, so what we'll do today is Suzanne will talk for a bit, sharing some of the information that she's prepared. We're going to do it more conversational. So you'll get to hear some of my questions as we go along. You're going to hear me fumble a lot. And we'll pause in the middle, and Suzanne is donating her time today instead of charging for this workshop. So if you want, I invite you to join me in donating to Palestinian American Women's Association. If you want to donate, I'll match your donation. Also during that time, we're going to do like a random number generator and give 2 people coffee cards. And I'm hoping you'll either meet up virtually or in real life, just so you can develop more community. I work with a lot of therapists, and not having community is one of the main challenges we all face. And then if we have time at the end, we're going to look at an intake form and talk as a group about how we can be more inclusive and culturally informed in our practices. And then I'll share the hard or the digital copy of that on my website later. I think that's everything I wanted to share. Thanks, Cinnamon, for sharing your info. So I'm going to turn the time over to Suzanne. And Suzanne, if there are questions, do you have a preference on whether we wait till the end to ask, or whether they're in the chat, or what's your preference?
Find people just asking.
Okay, cool.
As it kind of flows, but yeah, I bet also if people want to wait till the end, that's cool too.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Thanks. Yeah, if you want to get started, if you want to share your name, all of your information, and then kind of your 3 main points, we'll take it from there.
Okay, we'll take it from there. Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. I know it's Memorial Day weekend, so I appreciate everyone just taking that time to learn a little bit more about Arab Americans and how to work with these clients in the therapeutic setting. My name is Susan Abdel-Haq. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm from Ventura County. My pronouns are she, her. And, I've been in private practice since September. And one of my specialties is helping clients with addiction, anxiety, trauma. One of my other subspecialties is victims of narcissistic abuse. And also a big piece is just helping clients with acculturation, stress and anxiety. So just working with a lot of clients who are adult children of immigrant parents, and just helping them navigate, the anxiety of just, living in America, coming from a different cultural background, and, just getting support in that way, and just kind of the connection between, the identity and also trauma and anxiety. And I'm trained in EMDR and brain spotting. So I enjoy integrating those two, but I also really enjoy integrating narrative approaches, DBT skills, just really relational work. And that's a really important piece, especially with working with this clientele, Arab Americans. So yeah, I know for me, like when I went to Pepperdine, I graduated from Pepperdine University. We did have a cultural competency class, on multicultural counseling, but I didn't feel like there was any really emphasis on Arab Americans or Middle Eastern clients. There was maybe a sentence or two, but there wasn't really a lot of space for that. And even just now, for me as an Arab American, And being a therapist, there isn't that many workshops, and there isn't a lot of voice to working with this clientele. So, and it's important. It's important because, there's a lot of Arab Americans, and they also need therapy. And also just kind of, there's a lot of important pieces to know when working with these clients. So, I'm speaking from my personal lived experience as an Arab American. My family immigrated from Palestine. So even though I was born and raised here, there was a lot of unique challenges that I experienced growing up, and also just having anxiety. And I know for me, it took a while for me to find a therapist that I could really connect with, and that really gave me the space to share my unique experiences, being Arab American, and, some of the challenges that come with that. So I'll start with just kind of some of the three main points just to consider when working, if you happen to have an Arab American client, or even a client that maybe immigrated from an Arab country. It's really important to give that client space to share their story. So, just being very curious, non-judgmental, really wanting to understand some of the unique challenges that come with that. And, also just being mindful of listening to instances such as, discrimination, microaggressions that aren't really so micro, right? When we think about trauma and, the micro traumas that happen, throughout someone's life. And, just giving them that space, giving them that non-judgmental space to share what that's like. And, just being very cognizant of even just core beliefs, core beliefs of, I don't belong. I'm invisible. I feel like a foreigner, right? Even just being born and raised in the US, that is a common thing that a lot of Arab Americans feel on maybe even on a subconscious level, is that they don't belong because of, just the negative stereotypes and, so a lot of the stuff that happens in the Middle East. And also, there might be certain clients that may prefer an Arab therapist because, they feel like, okay, that person might kind of understand, or maybe someone that speaks Arabic. But also there might be certain clients that may not prefer an Arab therapist because there is still a lot of stigma attached to mental health. And also there might be this belief of, that they're going to go tell the community that I'm here, or if I see an Arab therapist, or can I share some really personal things, like, issues such as dating or sexuality, or, just some of the issues that typically are kept private. So just kind of being mindful that there's going to be some clients that might prefer a non-Arab, and then maybe some that maybe prefer someone who is an Arab therapist or has maybe a similar cultural background. So number two is, just being very curious and mindful of the unique challenges that Arab Americans clients may face, just especially when it comes to their immigrant parents. So a lot of expectations, so a lot of, Arabs that immigrate, depending on which generation and how tied to the culture, a lot of times they cling on really tight to that cultural identity because there's a fear of losing who they are and losing, their family ties to the homeland, but also how that gets projected on the kids that were born and raised here. And a lot of those clients, struggle with that because on one hand, they want to integrate and they want to fit in, but there's a lot of guilt and there's some shame around doing that and finding their own identities as Arab Americans. So sometimes something to consider is, maybe doing some family work and not pushing the therapist's agenda that, okay, this person should just be independent and just do their own thing. That might be the case with certain clients. Maybe that is the healthy way, but for some, maybe just being open to doing some family work, like having the mother come into session to just kind of provide that education about why their child's having this anxiety because of these expectations, and finding a way to kind of bridge that could be really healing and therapeutic. And just, also this kind of need to water down your identity. So, a lot of times you'll find Arab Americans, they'll change their names. They'll change their names, or there's anxiety with even just saying that I'm Arab, saying that you're Palestinian, because a lot of times they may feel like they're on the defense, right? Having to defend that they're not these negative stereotypes. So, just kind of being mindful and understanding of that. And, I think some of the main thing is you don't have to know everything, right? Because, the Middle East is very rich history. There's so many different cultural groups. There's so many different Arab countries. But I think just being curious about that client and giving them space to share that, what that's like. And there is an openness there. I think when clients feel like the therapist is really curious, that is very healing, because that might be one of the only spaces where they can, maybe be themselves or open up or share some of these deeper, more vulnerable feelings. Okay, and then also I think the third point is, just educating clients on what to expect in therapy. Just maybe providing that psychoeducation about, what therapy is, kind of what to expect, what's your unique style or approach. Because, for some people, it might be their first time going to therapy. And also it's like they may only know therapy from, the media or TV shows, and just being very open about you as a therapist, you as a person. And hey, this is kind of my style, and this is why I maybe am using this style or this intervention, I think is really helpful and can ease some of the anxiety of even just going to therapy as a start, because there's still a lot of stigma, and there still needs to be more education about, that anyone can go to therapy. It's not just when you're in a crisis or there's like addiction or severe mental instability. Therapy could be a space to, gain healing around just different life experiences that you've had, or just getting to know yourself. So yeah, that's kind of some of the main gist. So yeah.
Do you mind, Suzanne, if it's not too redundant, do you mind just saying the first, second, and third? Like, again, just obviously not the whole thing again, but
just kind of summarizing it.
Yeah.
So I think, the first point is giving clients space to share their story, giving them the space to share their story, and listening in for instances of things like microaggression, discrimination, internalized stereotypes that they may have about themselves, core beliefs, and just giving them that space. I think the story piece, I think that's number one. Number two is, I think, being very mindful of family, of, Arab Americans, and navigating their relationship with their families or extended families, and, what it's like to maybe deviate from their expectations or even the norm of the community, and just being very mindful about that. I would say is number two. And number three is just educating clients about what to expect in therapy, and just being very transparent about the process of therapy, and, what is your style? How do you work as a therapist? And, if there's certain modalities, like something like EMDR, and I think, this would be with really any client, is just explaining what is EMDR, why is that something that could be helpful, for example.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to go through each of the 3 points and see what questions you all have or what came up as you were looking at them. And you're welcome to just unmute yourself if you can unmute yourself. I don't know if I messed up the meeting settings, but hopefully you can unmute yourself. If you can't, let me know, or feel free to put your question in the chat. My question for the first one of giving clients space to share their story, listening for, internalized stereotypes, microaggressions, discrimination. One of the first questions I had was how to communicate your own curiosity in a way that's going to be understood, because I realized that like within every gender culture, like with all those layers of our identities, we communicate curiosity in different ways sometimes. And so I'm curious if there's certain ways to communicate it that are like easier to pick, to like read or to get across.
So for me, I'm very in the like in the moment. So like if, let's say, a client says something that they've experienced, I might just really ask, what was that like for you? What was that like for you to hear that from someone? What do you notice? I do some of the somatic stuff. What are you noticing in your body when you say that? What do you wish others, how do you wish others could have responded? Just really, that's kind of how I communicate some of that is really just, like, what's that like? What was that like for you to go through that? Is that the first time that you've shared that? Maybe is that the first time that you share that? Do you get, where do you find support around that? So really just validating, how powerful and hurtful maybe some of those experiences could be, or how challenging it is to navigate it. It's not necessarily like an instance of racism, but even just what it's like to navigate, maybe feelings of guilt, of, wanting to maybe step out of the norm in whether it's American white society norms, or even just within your community. What's that like to navigate that challenge? So that's kind of one thing. That's one way.
Yeah. So really getting to know what their experience is, and when a person shares something, not just like, oh, that's interesting or anything, but like really going into like, okay, what happened there and how did it feel and what were your interpretations of it? And
because there's a lot of times, people don't have space. They don't get a lot of space, or they don't know where they can turn to discuss even those, what we call the microaggressions, which aren't so micro. So therapy is a great way to really unpack that, because it all plays a part. So even, for example, like I can speak for myself, I grew up with people making fun of my last name, or I've had teachers, during roll call, like look at my last name and not even want to attempt to pronounce it, or try to pronounce it. And, over time, it's like, oh, I'm like, okay, yeah. But again, those are hurtful microaggressions that someone may, over time, you may not really connect with, as something that over time could be playing a part with, having presenting anxiety, or feeling dissociating, or even just the anxiety of like, oh my God, like if someone reads my name, I don't know how they're going to react.
That reminds me of that Resmaa Menakem quote about like trauma decontextualizes personality. Have you heard that? It's a really beautiful quote, but it kind of reminds me of how important it is to contextualize someone's emotional experience, like their anxiety or their dissociating, and kind of pick up on where it began. That's some of what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah. So a question I have with the second point of being mindful of challenges that Arab Americans face, especially in the family. And this is a broader question as well, like as a person who's not Arab and who has, like some overlapping identities, some different ones.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the space of, and this is just, I don't expect you to have like a right or wrong, but where is the space of you developing competency as a therapist and clinician and learning what microaggressions look like for this person, what discrimination looks like? And where is it like your own ignorance that could be causing harm as you learn these things?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have an opinion on that? And, do you hope most of us here are like going to go read several books first or do like multiple trainings first before we work with any Arab American or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for one, it's, you don't have to know everything, right? It's like everyone has their own kind of unique experience. So even if you worked with someone who has the same cultural, maybe sexual identity, that person's experience is still going to be unique. There's still going to be things that are different from yours. So I think, yeah, obviously, yeah, reading up, educating yourself about, some of the things that happen maybe in the Middle East, or just being open to it. And also, consulting with maybe a colleague that is Arab, that is also something that could be helpful as far as just maybe trying to maybe gain some deeper understanding. So yeah, consultation, supervision, being mindful of, supporting workshops done by maybe other Arab American or Middle Eastern Americans, right? Reading books on that, there's that. But also I think for as a therapist, being just mindful of maybe your own internalized maybe biases or stereotypes, even just asking like, okay, like let's say I got an Arab client, noticing what that's like for you. What is showing up? What are some of the automatic maybe thoughts or maybe stereotypes that are coming up, and just being very curious about that. Is that something that could be a positive in driving the relationship, or is that something that you're like, ooh, okay, I'm kind of coming in with these already preconceived ideas or stereotypes. How do I maybe get support around that, or can I work with that? So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah,
I think
I appreciate that.
yeah, and also it's, Arabs have been kind of an invisible minority, right? Because I was just telling you earlier is that only until now on Psychology Today did I even see checking off that I'm a Middle Eastern therapist. Because a lot of time in the consensus, there isn't usually like a Middle Eastern category, let alone Arab, right? And so a lot of times we're kind of forced to check off white. So that's where there's still a lot of invisibility when it comes to this identity. So I feel like now that's where a lot more maybe Arab Americans are being more open about mental health, in different, whether it's celebrities or just in, social media. And even for me, like just even having conversations like this and wanting to get to know other Arab therapists and just learning more about kind of their background and, where the barriers are for more clients to seek services.
So getting some consultation, paying attention to the news, or doing some work on understanding the history.
Yeah.
Doing some workshops.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So I have a question from Hope. I'll take it. What are some of the predominant stigmas around therapy mental health? Are there any specific examples about how to meet clients where they are regarding these stigmas? Yes. So I think for one, and I think this is common among a lot of communities, is that you go to therapy if things get really bad, or this person's crazy, or there's severe instability, right? Or oh, you don't need therapy. You can talk to a friend about that. So there's still a lot of, I think some of the main stigmas is still a lack of education, still about, what therapy is, right? Because therapy isn't just like, okay, like when there's a crisis, Therapy could be, a space to work on communication skills, parenting skills, just having support in general. So I think there is still that stigma that there is, it's changing, right? More and more people are being more open, but there is some of that layer. And there is like a lot of times people still may not be very open about the fact that they even see a therapist, because the first thought might be like, ooh, what's going on there? When it's just, I'm going to therapy because, I'm trying to deal with maybe work stress. So yeah, so I think there still needs to be more of that. And as far as
Suzanne, can I ask you a follow-up question on that?
Yes.
Is there anything that we can put in our, for a lot of us are in private practice or we're thinking about it, that we could put on our website that would address some of the stigma someone might be thinking in their minds as they're looking at our website, in order to kind of feel like, well, maybe it's still okay if I reach out for help?
Yeah. So I think, speaking to that experience, to the Arab, or even just the experience of someone who's maybe a second generation immigrant, about maybe some of the things that someone might be going through, like just conflict with their parents, and how therapy could be helpful for that, right? So maybe outlining different ways that therapy can help with other challenges that aren't necessarily like, having a severe mental illness or, having an addiction per se. And I think you can keep it broad. It doesn't have to be like, okay, this is just for the Arab American section of the website. But I think a lot of therapists do that, which is good, right? Outlining different ways that therapy could be helpful. But maybe if you want, kind of adding maybe if you want to work with this population, a few blurbs about just kind of how to set boundaries with your family, and doing it in a culturally, relevant way. I think that would be something.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. So give specific examples of things that they could come for that are clearly not like, this is, the worst case scenario that you would need therapy for. But like more mild things.
Yeah. So just having, okay, so I guess one is, family not approving of something. So for example, like let's say a client is like life transitions, I think is a big one. So let's say a client is wanting to get married. Let's say they're wanting to get married, and maybe they are marrying someone that isn't within the culture, let's say. And let's say the client is having a hard time managing the guilt of maybe a member of their family not approving of that, or really not approving that their child is stepping out of the norm of maybe marrying someone that isn't Arab, let's say, or isn't maybe within the same religion. And that is what that person's struggling with. That is the anxiety. The anxiety is like, oh man, like I don't want to lose my family. Family is important to me. It's part of my values. It's part of my cultural values. But at the same time, I want to live my life, and I found someone that makes me happy. So that would be, for example, an example.
Yeah, that's a great example. It almost makes me think that somebody who wants to work with a population that's been kind of treated as if they're invisible or they've been marginalized, having like if this was going to be someone's main area of focus in your practice, having like a pretty robust newsletter series or blog series on the very specifics of that experience would be so helpful for their potential clients.
Yeah.
And also, even just hearing you describe that, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That experience would be so stressful and so hard, but also like, if I'm not hearing about that experience often, it stays invisible.
Yes.
So there was like a series of regular writings about this somewhere for a specific population. That'd be so incredibly helpful.
Yeah. And also I think a common thing that I notice is this kind of living a double life. So it's like a lot of times the Arab American children of the immigrant they're trying to navigate their identities, and they're doing behaviors or things that wouldn't be acceptable to their parents. So it's like a lot of concealing, a lot of not being able to be open about that because of fear of judgment, fear of being excommunicated, maybe in some cases, not always. So not being able to go to their families for that support. So, for example, I've had, queer clients who are queer and who are also Middle Eastern. So, one of the issues that they literally come in and they're like, I don't know how to have both identities. How can I be both? How do I integrate that? And just, giving space for that challenge of that. And maybe teaching the client or talking about different ways that they can find, ways belonging, if it may not be from their families, unfortunately.
Yeah. So specifics around identity development, sense of belonging, or feeling you don't belong, life transitions, navigating family dynamics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also I think there was a question about, are there specific examples about how to meet clients where they are regarding these stigmas? Yeah, I think one of the big pieces, and again, it doesn't have to be a lot of space for it, but just maybe even just sharing, like, what's it like to come to therapy? What is your feelings about seeking support? Maybe exploring that. So I think that is one way to kind of bridge the stigmas, right? And also for me as an Arab American therapist, I just educating people, whenever I go to like any Arab gatherings, just kind of dispelling misconceptions about the work that I do, and just sharing a little bit about kind of the type of work that I do with clients. So even just in a small scale, just educating people in general, I think is a big part of it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there certain organizations or networking or places that you could go if someone wants to specifically serve the Arab American population?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a really good article that I found that also goes a little deeper into just different cultural considerations to have when working with Arab Americans. But as far as like workshops or books, that is still a process. That is something that I still, am trying to kind of seek out more or less. So I know for me, I'm new. I'm still newer in private practice. So, I've been just kind of meeting other Arab therapists and just piggybacking ideas. I mean, we've talked about maybe going into maybe even houses of worship, maybe going to certain churches, maybe going to mosques, places where you would find maybe more Arab Americans, and just giving workshops and talks. So I feel like this is still kind of the beginning of all of this, but if I find more books or anything, I'll make sure to share it with everyone.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have us pause and do donations for Palestinian American Women's Association, and then also do a draw for 2 coffee cards. So if you want to donate, let me put the, I'm going to put this in the chat. Let me find the donate button. You can actually become a member too, which is kind of cool. But I'm going to put this in here. So we do these donations just as a way of, in some ways, redistributing wealth, using whatever money we're earning to support organizations that are doing good, and especially those that are focused on liberating people. And Suzanne, I'd love to know why you chose this organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, for me, I'm Palestinian. So it's, it is personal, but also just supporting women and children. Just, that's really important to me. And just also, I know that a lot of, these people are struggling with trauma. struggling with whether intergenerational trauma or trauma from the things that go on in the Middle East. So I felt for me, one of the main reasons was obviously the mental health piece, right? Knowing that these are people that really, I'm sure, are struggling, and giving that donation, but also just women and children. That's the foundation of a lot. So that's a big piece
Yes.
for me.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I put in the chat, feel free to private message me and I'll, Lloyd Collective will match your donation. And I would also love to do the coffee card giveaway. So we have 9 people that could enter. So if you want to put in a number between 1 and 9, then I'm going to do a random number generator. So that includes you, Suzanne, if you want to. And like I mentioned, I really hope if it makes sense for people to meet up virtually or in person, just because I think therapists end up being so incredibly isolated. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any? Okay, we've got a duplicate on number 8. So Dylan, you want to choose a different number? Any other duplicates? We've got 2 3s also. So we've got a 1. Yeah. Okay, great. Does everyone have anyone not have a number? Actually, this is the question I want to ask. Okay. So the first one is number 6. That's Cinnamon. So Cinnamon, will you put your email in the chat and I'll send you a coffee card via email. And then number 7. So Lauren, will you do the same? And then if you two want to meet up, if you want to share, both of you are going to be sharing your emails with me. So I'll introduce you by email. Great. Okay. So I just got a message. Okay, about some donations as well. I'm just not fully understanding the message, so I'll message you later. Thank you. It sounds great. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to tell you just briefly, Lloyd Collective is my business, and the main goal of it is to help more therapists who are rooted in liberation to help you start a private practice. So I have an 8-week course, and yeah, through the 8-week process, you start your practice, or you can spread it out longer, or you could do it shorter. But it's pretty fun, and it's pretty fast. And you work in a cohort. I think those are the main things I want to share. So let me know if you have questions, or if you are just curious about whether or not you'd be able to start a private practice, or whether you'd be ready, or what it takes. Feel free to message me, and I'm happy to. Okay, I'm going to save these emails for Cinnamon and Lauren, and then I want to, we have, just about 15 minutes left. And I'd love to, Suzanne, if it's okay, just ask you more questions, because I have so many.
Yes.
And then I'm going to take what we learned today and put it into an intake. And actually, Suzanne, if you don't mind, I'll run it by you and see if you feel like it's like a decent, competent intake. And then I'll share that in my newsletter with the follow-up with the video as well. So one of the questions I had, you shared that one thing that you found really interesting was when going to therapy for yourself, you felt that it was safe enough that you could share your unique experiences.
Mhm.
And part of what you've shared so far is like a therapist doing follow-up questions or them wanting to know the nuance of your experience or you doing that for other people helps people feel safer.
Yes.
But I'm also curious, like for all of us, when we're sitting with someone with very different identities or just some overlapping, what also is going to create like that sense of, hey, I can share my unique experiences with this person.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So I think a big part of that is, obviously giving that space and not feeling like the therapist is projecting an agenda or like because I remember it's like, yeah, when I would go, I think the first time I went to therapy, it was a lot of like, oh, we'll just do this. Well, that's not going to work for me. That's not you really like, it's like, that's what I'm struggling with, is that for me, that may not work for me. So giving me the space just to even share why that is and what that's like is what really helped with my other therapist, help me feel more comfortable and safe. And it's not, and I'm not expecting I can speak for my personal, and I'm sure a lot, we're not expecting the therapist to know everything or to really understand all these little nuances, but just being very curious, and really what that was like for me. That's really, and validating my feelings around that. That's
Yeah,
what
that
really
validation
helped.
piece.
Yeah.
The
You
other
know,
thing I was wondering when I heard that too, then was um, the difference between, and I do clinical supervision in my private practice. So I'm always thinking of like the specifics of the skills that we use. So what I wonder is, um, how far do you validate as a clinician with someone with different experiences?
Mhm.
And where is it appropriate to empathize and where would it be disrespectful to empathize?
Mhm.
Be disrespectful and like, oh, I understand what it's like to be oppressed in these areas, so I'm going to extrapolate and say that I understand what your experience is like to be oppressed, or like
Mhm.
where's the line between validating and empathizing?
Mhm. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that is really just with almost any person.
I know I'm asking you hard questions,
It's okay.
Suzanne.
No, 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 this is good. Um, I think, I think one piece though, I think is when you're putting it more on the client to educate you, right? So I think just, and I don't know if this is kind of in line with this question or not, but for me, okay, I'm a Palestinian, I'm an Arab American. Yeah, I wanted that space for someone to let me feel my feelings around my identities and how hard it is at times in the US to manage that. But I wouldn't want the therapist to, literally want me to educate them on the Palestinian history. Like, that's where I would feel like, okay, yeah, I get that they want to know more and that's their way of showing, curiosity. But that's where I would feel like, this is me putting a lot of labor in.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate that. So
yeah,
like what's it like for you, but not what's the whole history of what you're telling me about, or
yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's helpful. Sorry, I think I might have cut you off.
No, it's okay. No, so I hope that was kind of in line with that a little bit. But it's a relationship. It's a relationship at the end of the day. Ask your client if you're not sure. Be open. Be like, hey, was that helpful for you? How did you feel in our last session? Did you feel like I was trying to understand what you were going through? Is there something that you feel like you need from me that would make this more beneficial for you? So I think it's like, it would be like the same type of thing with any client.
Yes, I
And
think that
also,
makes
maybe even exploring as maybe a non-Arab with them, be like, what's that like to say that in this space? How
yeah.
comfortable do you feel? I'm not Arab. I don't have that same experience. Does this feel comfortable for you? Do you feel like, our time, this is helpful for you still? Or what comes up? What comes up? What are maybe some barriers? What are some not barriers? And just being very open.
Yeah. One question I was thinking of is back in July of last year, I had this wonderful woman named Silvana Espinoza come talk to me, or to all of us. And she talked a lot about location of self, privileged identities, subjugated identities, and your ability as a clinician to be able to identify them, and then knowing when it's appropriate to share them or name them with the client. So then we talked, okay, like, should it be on your website? Should it be in your informed consent? Should you just wait for the client to bring it up? Like, where do we name what part of our experience would be relevant for them to know about and to acknowledge, so that it's not also like an elephant in the room or a thing that's affecting the experience but not named.
Yeah. So it's kind of like whether like how open as a therapist to be about your identities.
Yes.
Who you are.
Yeah. And
I
then
think
specific to Arab Americans, like what's going to make someone feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with just, if that is something that I think it depends on, at the end of the day, how comfortable you feel as a therapist, being open about that experience and even just naming it, so I don't think there's anything wrong with putting that out there. Definitely, it's all about just finding different ways to connect with maybe the clients that you want to work with, right? And I think the line, if we're talking about like, oh, what's the line, is, as long as like you're not dominating the therapy space, talking about yourself and just like your personal experiences, then I don't think there's anything wrong with having that transparency. Saying like, yeah, I'm also a queer woman. I'm also Palestinian. I'm also, I know what it's like to have experienced, instances of racism, as part of that. And I think the right clients will be drawn to that, the clients that you work the best with.
Thank you. I realize some of these are like more ignorant questions, so I really appreciate you being open to hearing just naturally what comes up. Any other questions that you all have as you're listening, or thoughts that you would be, you've heard some things like giving clients space to share, listening for microaggressions, discrimination, internalized stereotypes, being mindful of challenges that Arab Americans face, especially with family and transitions and identity, and then knowing how to educate your clients in the therapy space about, hey, here's what to expect, here's why I'm doing this, here's what a diagnosis means, here's what a therapy is, like what our modality is. Any questions that came up, if you all imagine like tomorrow I'm going to have a brand new client, they're going to be Arab American, what do I do? Like any questions that come up as you think about that. I think my main question then to follow up here, and then we'll wrap up, would be, oh, thanks, Hope. And so in what ways might you educate to address stigma? That's one question. And then thanks, Sheila. And then my question, Suzanne, is if people wanted to follow you for more information, do you have a newsletter? Do you have like an Instagram? What would be ways to stay connected?
Yes. So I have an Instagram. It's still a little new. I'm just starting to get in the habit of posting, but I do plan to, post a lot about just the Arab American experience. I mean, obviously I specialize in trauma, anxiety, but also the intersectionalities with identity. So that is a lot that I'm going to be doing, and also blogging. So I'll put in the chat my website and my Instagram handle. And yeah, I plan to maintain this journey of, giving talks, giving workshops, writing blogs, I'm open. I'm always open if people have questions, or if maybe they have a client and they're like, like, I don't really know what direction to go here, or this is something that I really don't know anything about. I'm always open to share and educate, or let people know, like, oh, this is what that might mean. And yeah, I'm always open for that. And I love that. I love building that community and helping others, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really awesome. And then did you see Hope's question?
In what ways? Okay. In what ways might you educate to address stigma? Informally scholarly ways, or more informal ways? Okay. So in formally scholarly ways, obviously, yeah, there's writing, there's workshops, there's, just kind of reading up on the material. There's, yeah. So I think in that, I think that spans with mental health in general, with many communities, right? Just dispelling that stigma that mental health is like, there's something seriously wrong with you if you go to a therapist. And I think in informal ways is just having conversations with people, educating, your family, friends, and yeah, I think that those are kind of some key ways. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to help us understand. You and I were talking right before this that these are the conversations people are not having. So I really appreciate you doing that with us. And thanks everyone for showing up and for being curious, and also just being committed to learning more and being better prepared to serve our Americans.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone. You'll get the video. You'll get a link for the video in the follow-up newsletters. But that's all we've got for you today. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.